The ice stretched endlessly, a frozen desert of white under the twilight of an Antarctic summer. Dr. Elena Moreau tightened the fur-lined hood around her face, her breath condensing in the biting cold as she stepped onto the observation deck of Aurora 23. The station hummed with activity beneath her, its sleek, modular design a testament to humanity's stubborn determination to explore even the most inhospitable corners of Earth. Dr. Moreau, we've got something, a voice crackled through her earpiece, pulling her from her reverie. It was Anika, her lead geophysicist. Elena hurried back inside, the station's warmth a stark contrast to the brutal cold outside. She descended the spiral staircase to the command center, where holographic displays filled the air with glowing data streams. Anika stood over a table-sized projection of the ice sheet, her brow furrowed in concentration. "What is it?" Elena asked, brushing snow from her jacket. Anika gestured to the projection. "We were scanning for subglacial lakes when the LiDAR picked up this." Elena leaned closer, her breath catching. Beneath the ice, an anomaly stood out like a beacon. It was a perfect geometric shape, triangular, massive, and buried 3 miles below the surface. "That can't be natural," Elena murmured. "It's not," Anika replied. "And its composition is strange. High-density material, but not metallic. Nothing we've seen before." The room buzzed with excitement as the rest of the team gathered around the projection. Speculation ran rampant. Was it an ancient volcanic formation, a previously unknown crystalline deposit, or something else entirely? Elena silenced the chatter with a raised hand. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Run every analysis we have and cross-reference it with geological records. I want answers before we call in the big guns." Hours turned into days as the team worked tirelessly, each new discovery deepening the mystery. The structure's edges were too sharp, its proportions too precise to be natural. Satellite imaging showed no signs of surface disruption, suggesting it had been there for millennia, undisturbed. Then came the breakthrough. A thermal scan revealed faint heat signatures emanating from the structure, patterns too rhythmic to be random. It was not only artificial, it was active. Elena sat alone in her quarters that night, staring at the data on her tablet. The anomaly was a Pandora's box, one that promised fame, fortune, and answers to questions humanity hadn't even thought to ask. But it also felt wrong, as though something ancient and malevolent was staring back at her from the icy depths. Her thoughts were interrupted by an incoming call. The holographic display blinked to life, revealing the stern face of Major David Harris, the government's liaison for high-priority research missions. "Dr. Moreau," he began without preamble, "we've reviewed your findings. This is no longer a research operation. This is a matter of national security." Elena's stomach tightened. "National security? With all due respect, Major, we're scientists, not soldiers. This is an archaeological... Whatever it is, it's not just a rock," Harris interrupted. "We're assembling a task force. You'll have additional personnel and equipment within 72 hours. Your team will lead the expedition, but this is no longer just your discovery. Do you understand?" Elena nodded, though the words tasted bitter. The discovery was slipping out of her control, but resistance would only result in her removal from the project. 3 days later, the ice surrounding the anomaly trembled as drilling rigs descended into the Earth. The task force had arrived in full force, bringing advanced technology and a sense of urgency that only deepened Elena's unease. The excavation was grueling. Every foot gained revealing more of the pyramid's impossible architecture. Its surface was smooth and black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Strange symbols etched into its surface glowed faintly, pulsating in time with an unseen rhythm. Elena stood at the edge of the excavation site, staring down at the uncovered apex of the pyramid. Major Harris joined her, his military precision contrasting sharply with her scientific curiosity. "What do you make of it?" he asked, his voice low. Elena hesitated. "It's ancient and alien. If it's a structure, it's like nothing humanity's ever encountered." Harris nodded grimly. "Then let's hope we're ready for whatever's inside." The breakthrough came late that evening. The team breached the pyramid's outer shell, revealing a dark, gaping entrance. A cold wind rushed out, carrying with it a low, otherworldly hum. The sound was neither organic nor mechanical, but something in between, a vibration that settled into the bones and refused to leave. Anika approached Elena, her face pale. "There's something down there," she whispered. Elena swallowed hard, her gaze fixed on the abyss below. She didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The next morning, the expedition team prepared to descend. Elena stood before them, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her mind. "This is a momentous discovery," she began. "We're stepping into the unknown, into history. But we must proceed with caution. We don't know what we'll find, and we can't afford to underestimate it." As the first team member disappeared into the shadows of the pyramid, Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Antarctic wind. Something was waiting for them inside, and it was watching. The descent into the pyramid began in tense silence. The team's headlamps barely pierced the suffocating darkness, their beams swallowed by walls that seemed to drink light. The structure's interior was a smooth, seamless black, its geometry both alien and unervingly perfect. Elena Moreau led the way, her pulse quickening with every step. Behind her, Major Harris clutched his rifle, his stoic expression betraying nothing. Dr. Malik, the team's cryptographer, lagged slightly, his eyes darting nervously to the glowing glyphs lining the walls. They pulsed faintly, their rhythm almost organic, like a heartbeat. "This isn't just a structure," Malik murmured, his voice trembling. "It's alive. No theories yet," Elena snapped, trying to steady her nerves. "Focus on gathering data." The air grew colder as they ventured deeper, the temperature dropping far below what even the Antarctic environment should allow. The low hum they'd heard at the entrance grew louder, vibrating in their chests like a subsonic growl. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its scale dwarfing them. The ceiling arched high above, shrouded in shadow. In the center stood an obelisk, black and smooth like the walls, but emitting a faint, shifting light. Suspended around it were orbs, each about the size of a human head, rotating lazily in the air as if defying gravity. "What the hell is this?" Harris muttered, stepping forward. Elena didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the glyphs covering the obelisk's surface. Unlike the static symbols on the walls, these shifted and rearranged themselves as if reacting to their presence. Malik approached cautiously, raising his handheld scanner. "These aren't symbols, they're equations. Complex mathematical sequences." Elena joined him, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "Equations for what?" "Containment," Malik said after a moment, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's a warning system. Something's being held here." Elena's stomach churned. She turned to Harris. "We need to halt the expedition. This isn't just a discovery, it's a potential threat." Harris frowned, his grip tightening on his weapon. "We don't leave until we know what we're dealing with. Keep moving." Tension crackled between them. But before Elena could argue, one of the orbs began to glow brighter. A low-frequency vibration pulsed through the chamber, making the floor feel like it was trembling beneath their feet. "Did someone touch something?" Harris barked, his voice sharp. "No," Elena replied, her heart racing. "It's reacting to us." Suddenly, the orb emitted a bright flash, and a scream echoed through the chamber. One of the engineers, Carter, staggered backward, clutching his head. His eyes were wide, his pupils dilated, and blood trickled from his nose. "What's happening to him?" Elena shouted, rushing to his side. Carter's mouth opened, but the words that spilled out were incomprehensible, guttural noises that didn't sound human. His body convulsed violently, and then, in an instant, he collapsed. Elena pressed her fingers to his neck, searching for a pulse. "He's gone," she said, her voice hollow. Harris scanned the room, his face grim. "We need answers. Malik, figure out what triggered that thing." Malik hesitated, his hands shaking as he adjusted his scanner. I don't know. It's like these orbs are connected to the obelisk. They're part of the same system. Then shut it down," Harris ordered. "You don't understand," Malik replied, his voice rising. "This technology is beyond anything we've ever seen. We're children playing with fire here." As if to emphasize his point, another orb began to glow, this time emitting a low, mournful sound. The chamber grew colder, and Elena felt an oppressive weight settle over her. "I think we need to leave," she said, her voice firm. "No one's leaving until we secure this site," Harris growled. "We came here for answers, and we're not leaving empty-handed." A flicker of movement caught Elena's eye, and she turned just in time to see the shadows along the walls shift unnaturally, curling and twisting as though alive. "Did anyone else see that?" she asked, her voice tight. The others froze, their eyes scanning the chamber. The shadows moved again, more deliberately this time, pooling together and forming something vaguely humanoid. The figure stood motionless for a moment before melting back into the darkness. "What the hell was that?" Harris demanded, raising his weapon. Malik's voice trembled. "I don't think we're alone in here." The team began to retreat toward the corridor, but the chamber seemed to resist their exit. The walls shimmered faintly, and the corridor behind them appeared to shift, its angles warping as if the pyramid itself was alive and aware of their presence. "Stay together," Elena said, her voice steady despite the rising panic in her chest. As they moved, the hum grew louder, its frequency oscillating in ways that made their ears ache and their vision blur. Malik stumbled, clutching his head. "I can't think," he groaned. "It's like it's inside my head." Elena grabbed his arm, pulling him upright. "We're almost out. Just keep moving." They finally reached the corridor's entrance, but as they stepped into the passage, the glyphs along the walls flared brightly, illuminating the space in a harsh, unnatural light. A voice, deep and resonant, yet incomprehensible, echoed around them, sending shivers down their spines. Harris raised his weapon, his hands trembling for the first time. "What is that? What's it saying?" Malik's eyes widened as he stared at the glyphs. "It's a warning. It's saying we don't belong here, that we've awakened something that should have stayed asleep." The voice faded, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The team stood frozen, the weight of Malik's words sinking in. Elena turned to Harris, her expression grim. "We need to leave now. If we stay any longer, we may not get out at all." Harris hesitated, his jaw tight. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. As the team made their way back toward the entrance, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed to press closer, and the hum followed them, growing fainter but never fully disappearing. They reached the surface just as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon. The icy wind stung Elena's face, but she welcomed it. It was a reminder that they were back in the real world, or at least what was left of it. But as she glanced back at the dark entrance of the pyramid, she knew the real danger wasn't inside anymore. It was what they had awakened, and the chilling certainty that it wasn't going to stay buried for long. The storm above ground grew fiercer, icy winds howling against the excavation site as if the very earth were protesting their intrusion. Inside the pyramid, the air felt heavier, thicker, as though the structure itself were alive and breathing. The team had returned reluctantly, driven by Major Harris's unyielding orders. Elena had argued, pleaded, but the military presence left her no room for refusal. "This isn't science anymore," she muttered to Dr. Malik as they descended once more into the pyramid's depths. "It's reckless." Malik's face was pale, his usually sharp eyes clouded with exhaustion. "Reckless doesn't even begin to cover it." Harris isn't just ignoring the danger. He's feeding it, ahead of them. Harris moved with the purpose of a man who could not afford doubt. His rifle was slung across his chest, his gaze scanning the walls, which now glowed brighter, their shifting glyphs more frenetic. It was as if the pyramid was responding to their presence, growing agitated. "This is our moment," Harris said, his voice echoing in the corridor. "We didn't come all this way to turn back now. Whatever's down here, we'll figure it out." Elena clenched her jaw, fighting the urge to shout at him. "You're not listening. Every step we take, this place reacts to us. It's not just a structure. It's an organism, a system designed to keep something in, not invite us in." Harris didn't answer, his focus locked on the path ahead. The team reached the central chamber again, its vastness as oppressive as before. The obelisk in the center pulsed with a cold, blue light, its surface alive with shifting symbols that seemed almost frantic. The floating orbs rotated faster now, their hum louder, resonating in their skulls. Elena approached the obelisk, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Malik followed hesitantly, his scanner trembling in his hands. "These glyphs," Malik said, pointing at a sequence. "They're evolving. When we were here before, this section wasn't here. It's adapting to us?" Elena's breath caught. "Adapting? Why?" Malik hesitated, his fingers dancing over his scanner. "I think the obelisk is trying to communicate. But it's not just language. It's using us, our emotions, our thoughts as input." Behind them, Harris stepped forward. "Then let's see what it wants. Can you interface with it?" "No," Malik said sharply. "This isn't some machine we can plug into. It's alien. It doesn't think like we do, and it certainly doesn't operate on principles we understand. Try anyway," Harris snapped. Elena turned to him, her frustration boiling over. "This isn't some military operation you can brute force, Harris. You don't understand what's at stake." Before Harris could respond, one of the orbs detached from its orbit and floated toward them. It hovered inches from Malik, pulsing faintly. "Don't touch it," Elena warned, her voice taut. But Malik didn't move. His eyes locked onto the orb, his face frozen in terror and awe. Without warning, the orb emitted a bright flash, and Malik screamed, clutching his head. The chamber shook violently as the glyphs on the obelisk flared to life, filling the air with a deafening hum. Malik collapsed, his body convulsing. Elena rushed to his side, shaking him. "Malik, can you hear me?" His eyes opened, but they were unfocused, his voice a strained whisper. "It's alive. It's watching us. It knows." "What knows?" Elena demanded. Malik's body went limp, his head lolling to the side. Harris pulled Elena away, his face a mask of tension. "We're losing control of the situation. We need answers, and we need them now." Elena rounded on him, fury in her voice. "Are you insane? Malik just died because of this place, and you still want to push forward?" Before Harris could respond, the obelisk emitted a low, resonant sound, and the air around it shimmered. A projection formed, a holographic image of a world consumed by darkness, its surface writhing with tendrils of shadow. Elena and Harris stared, transfixed, as the projection shifted, showing alien figures, tall, angular beings, building the pyramid. The figures worked frantically, their gestures desperate, as they erected the obelisk at the pyramid's center. "It's a prison," Elena whispered, realization dawning. "This isn't just a structure. It's a containment vessel. They built it to trap something." Harris's expression hardened. "Trap what?" The projection answered for them. The image shifted to reveal a formless, black mass, its surface rippling with eyes and mouths that shifted and disappeared. It consumed everything it touched, leaving only desolation in its wake. The projection faded, leaving the chamber in silence. "It's still here," Elena said, her voice trembling. "That's what the obelisk is holding. That's what we've been waking up." Harris gritted his teeth, his gaze darting around the chamber. "Then we finish what we started. If this thing is a threat, we destroy it." Elena shook her head. "You don't understand. The obelisk isn't just containing it. It's keeping it alive. If we damage this system, we might release it." The ground beneath them rumbled, and the glyphs on the walls flared brighter. The hum grew louder, almost unbearable. Elena's voice rose over the noise. "We need to get out of here. Now!" But before they could move, the shadows along the walls began to shift again, coalescing into shapes. They took on humanoid forms, their movements jerky and unnatural. Harris raised his weapon, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Get to the exit. I'll cover you." Elena hesitated, her instincts screaming to run, but her conscience refusing to leave anyone behind. "We leave together." The shadows surged toward them, their forms flickering between solidity and mist. Harris opened fire, the gunshots deafening in the enclosed space, but the bullets passed through the figures harmlessly. The team bolted for the corridor, the shadows pursuing them with a relentless, otherworldly speed. Elena's heart pounded as she raced through the twisting passage, the walls around them seeming to shift and close in. Just as they reached the exit, the shadows halted, retreating as though bound by an unseen barrier. Elena turned back, her breath ragged, and saw the obelisk glowing brighter than ever, its hum now a roar. "We woke it up," she said, her voice hollow. Harris grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the surface. "Then we make sure it doesn't leave this place." As they emerged into the freezing Antarctic air, Elena looked back at the pyramid, its dark entrance yawning like the maw of some ancient beast. She knew Harris was wrong. This wasn't something they could contain. It was already spreading. The icy expanse of Antarctica was deathly silent, the howling winds replaced by an unnatural stillness. The pyramid stood against the horizon like an ink stain on a blank canvas, its ominous presence a weight on Elena Moreau's chest. Her team, what remained of it, huddled in the relative safety of Aurora 23, their faces pale, their expressions hollow. Inside the command center, the tension was suffocating. Major Harris paced like a caged animal, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. The walls vibrated faintly, as if even the station was responding to the growing energy emanating from the pyramid. Elena sat at the central console, her eyes locked on the live feed from the drones circling the excavation site. The obelisk's light had grown blinding, and the once dormant glyphs on the pyramid's surface now pulsed in a chaotic rhythm. It was alive and angry. "This is spiraling out of control," Elena said, her voice breaking the silence. "We've woken something we don't understand, and it's growing stronger by the minute." Harris stopped pacing and glared at her. "Then we stop it. We call in an airstrike, level the site, and bury whatever's down there. You don't get it, do you?" Elena snapped, standing to face him. Destroying the pyramid might be exactly what it wants. The obelisk isn't just a prison. It's the only thing keeping that thing contained. If we break it, we unleash something we can't control. What's the alternative? Harris shot back. Sit here and wait for it to come for us? Elena hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on her. The truth was she didn't have an answer. The entity inside the pyramid defied logic, defied science. It was ancient, malevolent, and far beyond human comprehension. The lights flickered, and the station shuddered. Anika, the last of Elena's original team, looked up from her console, her face pale. The energy readings are spiking again. It's spreading. I'm detecting anomalies in the surrounding ice. Fractures, heat signatures, movement. Movement? Harris barked, striding to her station. Anika nodded, her hands shaking as she pointed to the screen. It's like the ice is reshaping itself. Something beneath the surface is reacting to the pyramid. Elena's stomach twisted. It's reaching out. It's trying to escape. Harris turned to her, his expression grim. Then we have no choice. If we can't destroy it, we contain it. We seal the entrance, collapse the tunnels, and make sure nothing comes out. And how do you plan to do that? Elena asked, her voice rising. We barely understand how this thing works, let alone how to stop it. The station shuddered again, more violently this time. A low, guttural hum echoed through the air, vibrating in their bones. Anika let out a gasp, her eyes wide with terror. It's here, she whispered. Elena's heart sank as she turned to the monitors. The shadows inside the pyramid had begun to spill out, dark tendrils curling and twisting across the ice. The drone's feeds flickered and died, one by one, as the shadows consumed them. We have to leave, Anika said, her voice trembling. We have to get out of here. There's nowhere to go, Harris replied, his tone cold and steady. If this thing gets out, it won't stop at Antarctica. It'll spread. It'll consume everything. Elena closed her eyes, her mind racing. There had to be a way. The pyramid's builders had created the obelisk for a reason, a way to contain the entity. If they could figure out how it worked, they might stand a chance. She opened her eyes, her gaze locking with Anika's. The obelisk, she said. It's the key. If we can stabilize it, reinforce its containment field, we might be able to stop this. Or we might make it worse, Harris countered. Do you have a better idea? Elena shot back. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum, growing louder, closer. Finally, Harris nodded. What do you need? Elena took a deep breath, formulating a plan. Anika, I need you to access the station's energy reserves. We're going to reroute power into a focus beam and direct it at the obelisk. If it works, it should reinforce the containment field. And if it doesn't? Anika asked. Elena didn't answer. They worked quickly, every second feeling like an eternity. Anika's hands flew over the controls, her movements precise despite the fear in her eyes. Harris and his remaining soldiers prepared the station's portable generators, linking them to the main power grid. Elena monitored the pyramid, her heart pounding as the shadows crept closer to the station. The entity wasn't just escaping, it was hunting them. Finally, Anika looked up. We're ready? Elena nodded, her voice steady despite the chaos. Do it. The station's lights dimmed as power surged into the generators. Outside, a focus beam of energy shot toward the pyramid, striking the obelisk at its core. The glyphs flared brighter than ever, their rhythm synchronizing into a steady pulse. For a moment, it seemed to work. The shadows recoiled, retreating back toward the pyramid. The hum subsided, replaced by a tense, expectant silence. But then the obelisk cracked. A fissure ran down its surface, releasing a blinding light. The shadows surged forward, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. The containment field had failed. Fall back, Harris shouted, grabbing Elena and pulling her toward the station's exit. The shadows poured into the station, consuming everything in their path. Anika screamed as one of the tendrils wrapped around her, dragging her into the darkness. Harris fired his weapon, but the bullets did nothing. Elena ran, her lungs burning, her mind racing. She reached the station's escape vehicle, slamming her hand on the controls to seal the hatch. Harris followed, bloodied and breathless, just as the shadows reached the door. The vehicle launched into the icy expanse, its engines roaring. Through the window, Elena watched as the station was consumed, its lights snuffed out one by one. It's over, Harris said, his voice hollow. Elena shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, it's just beginning. Far behind them, the pyramid glowed with an otherworldly light, its ancient, malevolent occupant finally free. The hum returned, louder than ever, resonating across the frozen wasteland. Humanity had awakened something it could never contain. And now, it was coming for them all.